Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have full review of the POCO X6 5G. Let's get started. This device by price is part of the lower mid-range, however, by specifications it could perfectly be considered as a mid-range or upper mid-range device. With this, I am telling you that it is going to be a totally recommended purchase. But anyway, let me show you all its features so you can know it in more depth. The launch price in Mexico for the most basic unit is $4,699, which is approximately $275, although remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. This is for the 8GB RAM version with 256GB of storage, but there is also a 512GB storage edition with 12GB of RAM priced at 5,199 pesos. This is approximately $305, so I insist that it is an extremely attractive device for its price. Possibly it has better specifications than all its competitors, but I insist that not everything is about specifications, so how about you join me to know it point by point so you can know if it is what you are looking for or not. Before we start talking about the design, I forgot to tell you that its distribution is exclusively in online stores, and that could be one of its few weak points because if you are not used to buying online, it could give you some fear to acquire this device that way. On the front, we find an extremely attractive design thanks to the ultra-reduced bezels it has. This must be emphasized because even the lower bezel is very reduced and compared against all its competitors is going to have a more attractive design with a better use of the front as part of the screen. But not only that, but we will also find Gorilla Glass Victus protection. This is a level of protection that we usually only find in the most expensive flagship devices. That is why it stands out so much that it has this level of protection on the screen, so it not only has good aesthetics but also good resistance. On the right side, we will find the power button with the volume buttons. On the top, we find infrared for universal remote control, microphone, secondary audio output, and finally the headphone jack. The left side is completely clean and serves to appreciate that it is 7.98mm thick. At the bottom is located the tray to place the nano SIM card. In fact, it has two slots for this type of card, but you cannot place a micro SD card, and this could be its main weakness. Although honestly, with so much internal storage, you probably don't need a micro SD card, but most competitors do offer this feature. After that, we will have a microphone, the USB-C port, and finally the main speaker. The back cover is probably another one of these weak points because it looks very plain. It is made of plastic, and in this case it tends to pick up fingerprints from your fingers a lot. So it's not a very nice or very stylish design, unlike the vast majority of its rival devices. In this case, I have the black edition, but it is also available in white, which apparently has a slightly more textured finish, and finally it is also available in blue. Its weight is 181 grams, so it could be considered a thin and light device, and it comes with IP54 certification, so it will resist splashes of water, but you can't submerge it. Still, for this price, I think it is appreciated to have this certification, and in conjunction with Gorilla Glass Victus makes resistance another of the strengths of this device. The screen will be another of the strong points of this device because it possibly stands out in everything over its competitors. It has 6.67 inches in its diagonal and a resolution slightly higher than Full HD. It is called 1.5K and specifically is 1220 by 2712 pixels. With this resolution, it reaches a density of 466 pixels per inch, being the highest density in its category. This means that even small text will look very sharp and it will be very difficult to distinguish any pixel. So it is a really very good screen with Flow AMOLED technology, which helps it to have intense colors, very high contrast, and also good viewing angles. So it is a screen that in each of its parameters gets to stand out a lot. It even reaches a peak brightness of 1800 nits, which is very high. Again, it is a feature that we usually only see reserved for the high-end, but seeing it in a device of this price makes it practically irresistible to buy this device. Similarly, the lower brightness can become very comfortable for use in dark areas and also has 120 Hz in its refresh rate, so you can leave the default setting so that it adapts automatically, or you can set manually if you want to have 60 or 120 Hz in the fluidity of movement. But it really is another feature that stands out a lot on this screen. Like many devices, it has dark mode, also allows you to select the color calibration setting you want in case you need an even more saturated color setting, or you can also very specifically adjust the color temperature of this display. The display even supports Dolby Vision content, so it is spectacular in every way you look at it, totally superior to many other devices, even more expensive devices, so that is easily another of its strengths. As I had already shown, it comes with 2 speakers, so if you have stereo sound, is possibly the best sound of the range with good stereo amplitude and a sufficient presence of bass frequencies. Definitely for its price, it is excellent, only it should be made clear that the audio output that is at the top is shared with the headset area for calls, so the audio does not come only from the frame of the device. What do you think if we listen to a small test? Although remember, it's not the same as listening to it live. Also note how in the audio settings we have the sound effects category where we find Dolby Atmos, and with this we can access a graphic equalizer that has different presets and also a 10-band setting so that you can customize how you want these speakers to sound. Obviously they will also work with headphones, but here the remarkable thing is that most competitors do not allow us to modify the equalization of the sound of the speakers. So also in this section we find another of its strengths. But since it is such an attractive device in every way, we must find a point of improvement, and in this case Samsung includes a function called independent application sound that we will not find in this device. This feature would allow you to have some apps keep their sound on the device and other apps send their sound to a Bluetooth speaker, so you can have multiple things playing in a party, but this cell phone can't do that. A small weakness that I simply mention because I need to find weaknesses in this device that is very good. It also has a headphone jack, so you can perfectly use this accessory, and if you prefer to use wireless headphones, it also has support for the aptX adaptive codec that will give us a good quality in the resolution of the wireless audio, in addition to the simplest codecs, SPC and AAC. And to finish talking about the audio, I remind you that it has 2 microphones, so if you pick up stereo sound below, you will hear an audio test recorded with this device.
Esta es una prueba de los micrófonos del POCO X6 5G, un dispositivo de la gama media.
Then I will record in an environment with very high volume using the sound system I have in my house to more or less give a similar situation to what you would have in a concert, and notice if the microphones come to saturate or not.
Love's a gun and baby, you're my sugar girl. You kiss me in a way that gives me high. You make all my dreams come true. It feels right. You spin around you. We could break up and then make up. I always come back to you. You move me in a way that
We only noticed a loss in the clarity of the sound when the volume is louder, but it does not become saturated, so even in these conditions the microphones work well. The front camera is 16 megapixels with aperture f2.45 and fixed focus, and in addition to the camera aperture mode that have all devices today from the lock screen, in this case through the settings we will be able to enable another type of camera. Start can be by double pressing the power button, or from the lock screen you can double press the volume down button, then it does have a quick opening mechanism, but sometimes the gesture of 2 taps on the power button can cause the device to lock. So it doesn't always work well, but it can help you speed open the camera. The capture speed is going to be extremely good, although it doesn't have a burst available in this front camera mode. In the bottom right corner we are going to find the button to access the special beauty effects, where we can determine different parameters. And in the additional settings, you can enable the capture showing the palm of the hand to make it much easier, especially on occasions where the shutter is difficult to reach. And from the advanced settings, we can also set it to take a picture picture by tapping anywhere on the screen. The results with the front-facing camera on this device I think are in line with its price. In this case, I couldn't tell you it's anything spectacular. We have an adequate level of detail. Honestly, it doesn't look 16 megapixel, it looks 8 megapixel, but we couldn't get too picky at this price point. I think it does a good enough color rendition and offers the right level of detail. Obviously, it has fixed focus, so if you're a little further away or a little closer to the camera, it's going to be a lot more out of focus. However, in this case, it's much more optimized for being close to the camera, which could be annoying in group shots. In backlit photos, notice how the preview doesn't look too bad compared to other devices, and it does have automatic HDR. I found the result to be quite remarkable, so I think this is a strong point. Backlit photos expose them very well. Indoors, with much lower light conditions, we are going to find more noise present and little definition, but this is what we expected in a device of this price. Colors also lose saturation and there's not as much detail. And at night you will have a good result if you are near a light source, although it is still not something very spectacular. If you use the night mode, the level of detail will be much higher and even the colors will look more defined and there will be less noise as well as a better balance of light and shadow. So it is highly recommended to use the night mode in these conditions. This is a photograph in even more extreme conditions because it is a night backlight with virtually no direct lighting. And notice how the night mode manages to improve the photograph a little bit, although in this kind of much more extreme conditions it fails to have a clean result as there will be much more noise present in the darker areas. Therefore, photography is not its most attractive point, but in this range we could not demand more. In fact, if you use the screen as a flash simulation, maybe it could improve the result, although it is a very cold lighting. So if you're in a warm environment, the result is going to look very unbalanced in color. And note how you can take good portrait pictures in the evenings, with good edge detection and natural blur. But in portrait photography in the daytime, we find that it's not really able to detect objects, so the pictures won't come out very natural. Ideally, you should take pictures without any objects nearby, as the bokeh effect generated from the background is pleasant, but it does not detect the foreground well. On the back, we find several cameras. First, we have the 14mm, which is the ultra-wide camera of 8 megapixels with f2.2 aperture and fixed focus. Then there is the 24mm camera, which is considered the main camera, 64 megapixels with f1.8 aperture, autofocus, and also optical stabilization. So it surprises in its specifications as well. And thanks to the high-resolution sensor, it can make a crop on the sensor to give us a kind of virtual camera with a focal length equivalent to 50mm. That is Zoom 2X, which maintains optical quality with 12 megapixels, aperture f1.8, autofocus, and optical stabilization because they are the same features of the main camera. And finally, we have the 2-megapixel macro camera with f2.4 aperture fixed focus. So that camera doesn't interest me very much, but in the price range I couldn't ask for anything better. In auto mode, the pictures, notice how they are extremely fast in their speed. Next, I will try to capture number 3 to see roughly how the quality or shutter speed is. I'll take 2 tries to be absolutely sure I'm capturing at exactly the right time. In this case, it seems to have captured the photograph even before I press the shutter. I took another picture to make sure, and it appears that yes, it does have some sort of buffer that allows it to take the pictures even before I touch the shutter. In fact, if you slide the shutter to the right, you could also start a burst of up to 20 pictures. So that could also help you capture some moments. Although in this sense, I think that the burst is not the strongest point of this device due to the limit of 20 photos, but it would allow us to capture an exact moment. In the main camera interface, we find a button to load all the filters, which we can preview in real time. We also have a beauty mode, but in this case only with one parameter. The camera also offers artificial intelligence in case you want a better automatic of the photos. It has a button called Camera Assistant that will allow you to shoot the photo from another device of the same brand. It also has an option to add a watermark in a different way to your photos. It can be a traditional watermark that simply adds the date and also the model from which the photo was taken, but there is also another category called Film Frame, where notice how it adds the watermark in a different way and the information is outside the photo. In the main interface, if you tap on screen, you can adjust the exposure and also the focus. If you have it enabled in the settings, it will also take a picture. But if you want more manual controls, you can access the Pro mode, where you can use both the ultra-wide camera and the main camera. In this case, it doesn't allow you to use the virtual 2x camera, but it does allow you to modify some other parameters like white balance, focus, shutter speed, which can be up to 30 seconds, and also ISO, which can go up to 6400. So we have good parameters in addition to exposure compensation, but the thing to note is that it doesn't allow you to take raw pictures for more advanced post-processing. It's also not able to automatically detect when you want to scan a document, but it does have a document mode that will help you crop the sheet. And note how in this case it also allows you to modify the style of the scan to place a black and white effect or an enhanced effect. And you can also do some other cropping, straightening, or also modify some other things in the document. So it is very handy, although it is saved as an image and not as a file, but you can perfectly well send it to print, and in this case you could export it as a PDF document. But curiously, you should not send it to print with the Xiaomi tool, but with the Android tool, so it has here a bit of redundancy, as it offers two printing tools, and in one of them does not allow you to export in PDF, but in another, yes. And finally, before seeing the results of the camera, note that QR codes can be scanned automatically, showing a button in the lower right corner to access whatever that code means. This device offers us the ability to take pictures in 64 megapixels, but it is curious the results, since in some areas of the photograph does seem to have a good level of detail. However, there are other areas where the result looks too weird, with lots of grain, lots of noise, mainly on the sides of the photograph, since the central part is where it seems to be a little better defined, but in general it will not serve you to take pictures of such high resolution. In fact, it is curious that it allows us to take pictures with 64 megapixels, applying zoom 2x, confirming that it is only interpolating the pixels. In motion pictures, notice that the main camera does an excellent job because it does freeze the motion and there's no wandering whatsoever. The ultra-wide camera has practically the same performance in this type of motion pictures, but we are already starting to realize that it changes the colors drastically. Notice, this is the photograph with the main camera that gives us a pretty good color rendition. I think it does have good accuracy in this regard, and it obviously has a good level of detail because the photographs in automatic mode will be 16 megapixels. But the ultra-wide camera is a little bit less color accurate, a little bit cooler, and obviously it's going to have less level of detail, and it can also generate a lot more chromatic aberration because the lens is not as high quality. And the 2x zoom photography does get to maintain optical quality, so this is excellent news. We have good photography in this mode with this sort of virtual 2x camera. The pictures in this setting are gonna come out well. Now you're looking at a picture with 5x digital zoom, where it still maintains a good quality and the maximum it allows you to get to is 10x, and honestly in this case I feel it already looks a bit forced or artificial. In fact, you can get to notice a little more difference in the quality of the zoom in this case. Notice how at maximum zoom I feel it's already losing quite a bit of definition, but obviously in the price range we can't be too demanding, so I think the zoom is good. Indoors we have a much less accurate color rendition. The truth is that colors feel a little strange, but the main camera maintains a good level of detail and good noise management, although it appears quite grainy in darker areas. On this occasion, I feel that the ultra-wide camera has slightly more accurate colors, but much more noise appears in this type of intermediate lighting conditions. And notice that using the 2x setting, we still see good quality, which could be considered optical quality, and we have better noise handling. Backlit, interestingly, the preview looks much better than other devices, and again it should be emphasized that it does have automatic HDR. The result is good in terms of light and shadow balance. However, if we go to notice the details a little closer, we will notice that the photograph does not look as high quality as it should. You don't see as much level of detail. There are some areas that look a little more out of focus from the foreground. So, the photography is not spectacular, but it does perform well against the backlight. The ultra-wide camera also performs well in these conditions, although in these backlit conditions you can get a lot more of the chromatic aberration that is very evident in this case, which turns purple. But at this price we could not get so demanding as to ask for it to be removed, although there are some areas where it is definitely super evident. At night, the auto mode performs well as one would expect in this price range. Nothing really spectacular, but I like that it doesn't seem to have exaggerated noise. And if you use the night mode, what will improve is the balance of highlights and shadows, as the brighter areas can be better regulated, as well as saturating the colors a little bit more, although it still maintains a bit of graininess in the darker areas. The ultra-wide camera has a very similar performance. I like that you don't notice so much noise, and it can also be used in night mode, although in this case there is not so much difference. In fact, you still notice quite a bit of noise in the darker areas which have light backgrounds. And notice that the Zoom 2x camera setting also allows us to use it in night mode. First, you are looking at a picture without night mode, and notice how the night mode helps quite a bit to balance the brighter areas well and improve the color saturation of the darker areas. And while we're on the subject of darker areas, in some situations where there is no longer as much illumination, the ultra-wide camera still performs well, although it doesn't make as much of a difference when you turn on night mode. And the main camera has a color rendition that is too distorted from reality in these types of conditions, and with the night mode we don't see an improvement in that aspect either. The main camera can focus on small objects, but you can't be that close or else it will start to struggle a lot in focus. But I like the result you can get in macro shots with the main camera. If you apply digital zoom, you can get a little closer, and with the Zoom 2x setting you keep a good quality, although the color rendition is curiously distorted. And with the macro camera you can get even closer, and honestly in this case I think it does have a higher level of detail than you can get with the main camera. So I do not despise so much the macro camera in this device, but you should know that the colors come out too bad and with enough noise. And in addition to the ultra-wide camera, remember that you can use the panoramic mode to have a capture with more information, and in this case it has a good resolution. So yes, it is useful, this mode, because it also has better colors than the ultra-wide camera. And finally, the portrait pictures are taken in a very good way, keeping the foreground in focus, even in this case, which is a quite difficult condition where there are lights and shadows on the same face. We have a good result. Maybe the level of detail in the foreground does not look so spectacular, but it does have a good edge detection. It can even detect the objects and blur them little by little as they move away. So the reality is that portrait photography is a very good point of this device. In video recording, we will also find strong points, as this device can indeed record video in 4K, something that no competitor can achieve yet, although it only does it with the main camera, but in the price range we could not get so demanding. Note that it can also record in full HD at 60 frames per second, but again, this is a setting you can only apply with the main camera, as if you switch to the ultra-wide camera, it will switch to 30 frames per second. So full HD at 30 frames per second is the recommended setting for this device. And notice that in the bottom right corner it has a button where we can select some color filters that are applied even while maintaining the full HD resolution. And there is also a beauty mode that you can use, but the beauty mode is going to lower the resolution towards HD. And pay close attention, because a special stabilizer mode is a little bit hidden in the menu where you can enable it. So for scenes with a lot of action, you have to enter this special menu. When recording a video, we have a convenient slider for zooming, but it doesn't offer us quick shortcuts to direct us to some zoom setting. And we can pause and resume our recording. We can also take pictures while we're recording, but we can't turn on the flashlight. That could be a weak point, because other competitors do let you turn on the flashlight while you are recording. So on this device you need to stop your recording before you can make any changes to the lighting. And another thing that this device doesn't allow you to do is to rotate to the front camera without the need to stop your video recording. But as a very remarkable point is that the Pro mode does have the ability to record video. So while you are recording, you could modify the focus and other parameters, giving you a much more professional experience. The video recording has as a positive point the quality of the level of detail that it has, and also seems to me that it does have considerably accurate colors. I like the recording overall, especially considering the price. It really is a very good quality video. The zoom is not that noticeable in the video. If you get to notice a bit stretched and pixelated the result, then it doesn't really stand out in this section. But if you don't zoom in, I think you will have a considerably good video. If you record with the ultra-wide camera, you're going to have less detail because you're only recording in full HD and the colors also feel slightly less accurate. So even though it's a simple camera, I think it can also do the job for recording wider scenes. And by the way, while it does let you zoom in with the ultra-wide camera, it doesn't really do the switch and transition to the main lens. So you're pretty limited in the zoom section when recording video. Indoors, the main camera is not able to pick up lighting well, so a lot of noise appears. Colors are quite inaccurate, so it is not recommended to record in medium lighting conditions. The ultra-wide camera seems to have a little less noise, curiously, although it also has some aggressive jumps in the exposure and the quality does not stand out. In backlighting, it is as expected. That is, it gives priority to illuminate the face, sacrificing quite a lot of the illuminated areas, so it overexposes them quite a lot. So the ideal would be to record with the light from the front and with little light behind to get a more balanced video in color. But we could not demand it in a more advanced result. With the ultra-wide camera, you seem to have a little better balance in this regard, so it could also help you in this kind of shooting. And at night again, I find it curious that with the main camera we have much more noise present. You notice a very low quality in the video recording, so this is possibly its weakest point. We have a result that really is very simple. We have no level of detail and very little definition due to all that noise that is trying to reduce but is not achieved. And I find it very curious because the ultra-wide camera seems to perform better in this aspect. And usually it's always the other way around. Usually the ultra-wide camera performs worse, but in this case it seems to do a little bit better. Fortunately, you do have stabilization recording even in 4K, although it is a basic stabilization that will be useful for walking and slight movements, but for running it will not be enough because you will notice those aggressive movements. With the ultra-wide camera, you will also have stabilization. So I think it could also help you in these scenes of more action to record with this camera, because having more amplitude can pass more disguised exaggerated movements, although for the more complicated you could enable the super stable mode that will also work in full HD. And somehow it tries to better disguise the more aggressive movements, although it seems to have a blur effect at times due to all this fast movement, so it's not a recommended device for action-packed scenes. But note that fortunately the focus will work well. It will not get too confused. It does adjust with the movements, even fast movements. It also adjusts the exposure well. So it seems to me that it is a device that does record with good quality. Of course, it will not be an expert in this area, but I think it offers a good recording quality even in small objects. It also offers fast motion from 4 to 1800x in 4K. So yes, you could record movements of people quickly walking, doing short actions, or also the growth of a plant that would be much more spectacular. It also has slow motion, so it can be in full HD at 120 frames per second, although it doesn't seem to be full HD quality but a little bit lower. Or you can also go in HD at 240 frames per second, so it's a slow motion that can become useful. Obviously, it's the right thing in this price range. It may even come as a surprise because several competitors might have simpler slow motion or no slow motion at all. The front camera has much simpler recording, as it does not offer stabilization. The colors are also not very accurate. It does not seem to have good quality, although the level of detail is positive despite only being full HD. In backlit situations, you will notice that this camera also fails to balance lights and shadows well, but it is not something we could demand for the price range. It also doesn't have autofocus, but again, that's to be expected in this price range. Indoors, there is also a lot of noise present in the darker areas, although it also tries to hide it when there is not so much movement. I think the quality can become acceptable, it is not so strange. The same thing happens at night. As long as you have a light source more or less close, I think the result can be positive. Although it does feel like it's going at a slow shutter speed because the movements don't look so well defined, but we couldn't get too picky on a device of this price. Obviously, in darker areas, there will be a bit more noise present. In the practically twilight areas, it's not going to be able to recover much light, but it's also appreciated that it doesn't have an exaggerated amount of noise. So, its recording capabilities are as expected within the range. It also offers a fast camera very similar to the rear camera, which can be useful, but it doesn't have slow motion or any portrait recording mode. Nor does it have a dual recording mode, not even within the short mode, which is where Xiaomi had been placing it recently. In the software, we will find Android 13 running on this device in conjunction with MIUI 14.0.6. It is guaranteed to be upgraded to HyperOS, which is Xiaomi's new operating system. So that's good news if you're a little leery of MIUI still. It is assumed that with HyperOS, they have corrected many problems they had in their system. And it should be made clear that this device includes guaranteed 3 years of software updates and 4 years of security patches. A feature that no other device in the range can boast, so it is another strong point. As additional functions, we will find the always-on display, also known as always-on display, which is going to allow us to have some special cover to show the time and some notifications even if we have our device locked. So you can customize here what you want it to show, and simply when you lock your phone, that cover will still appear. It is a considerably good design element. In addition to that, it has a front camera assistant that supposedly lets us activate some special options when the front camera is being used. Notice how in this case, when I'm on a video call, there's this additional option that I can enable as a fill light, and it's gonna try to light me up better when I'm talking in a slightly darker condition. Through this tool, I can turn this option off or on. Right now, because I'm in a very brightly lit condition, you can't see the difference, but it may come in handy. This device also has the floating windows option, and you can have a sidebar always visible so you can display these shortcuts. And this feature will allow us to open applications in this floating format, although it will only allow us to open 2 applications at the same time in this format, but it is still very useful to have several applications open at the same time. You can also minimize them in a small bubble on the side, and obviously you can change their size and also their position. In fact, you could also minimize it in the upper right corner, but you can only minimize one application at a time in this format. Also, it should be noted that YouTube does not support this format, but Instagram does. Xiaomi also includes a heart rate reader, taking advantage of the fingerprint reader inside the screen it has, so it can become a useful feature, although the most common for this type of monitoring is a smartwatch, but you can also achieve it here. Notice that there we have the result. Another outstanding feature of virtually all Xiaomi devices is the Mi Remote app, which will use the infrared of this device to work as a universal remote control, and you can control not only TVs but also a fan, set-top box, players, projectors, and other things. And finally, note that in its photo editor, it does have an object eraser, although you have to download it, so make sure you have an internet connection the first time you are going to use it. The eraser can get very smart. It has a manual mode, or it has a special mode to automatically detect objects, and see how simply clicking on them can do its job. In this case, it wasn't able to detect it correctly, so I'm going to try to lock it in and see now how it can get to do its job in a more or less good way. If you get to notice it a little bit, but it can get to be useful for basic edits. In fact, it also has a function to remove shadows or remove people as well, so let's try the remove people option and see how it will automatically detect the people in the picture and suggest to me to remove them. It even detected people that were very far away, so I can perfectly select the X to remove them, and I'm going to remove me too to see more or less what the result would be. And as you see, it comes out in good quality. Let's see if it manages to remove this shadow that appears projected here, but I get an announcement that the food could not be detected. So it seems that this option is focused on people who usually take a picture of their food, and the shadow of the cell phone is projected on top, so with this one they could remove those shadows. The artificial intelligence editor seems good enough to me, especially for the price point of this device. The interaction of the system is good, and it has an attic motor on the Z-axis, so it is a simple vibration that does not offer feedback with different actions on the system, so it is a basic experience in that sense, but definitely that for the price we could not get more demanding. Overall, this is a fairly modified system with many additions. So far, I have not detected any bugs or problems, but it can always become a controversial point in little, although when you receive the update to HyperOS can possibly improve in this aspect. Currently, it can display advertising within some applications, and that can definitely become annoying for some people, but it is a way to recover some of the money you are practically giving away. because it is an extremely economical cell phone compared to the specifications it has. So the price to pay also includes seeing ads in these applications, so it can become common in the operating system. Notice how another ad is popping up there when I open the security application. And while we're on the subject of security, it has a fingerprint reader that's inside the screen, supports 5 enrollments, and is quite fast, especially compared to other devices in this price range. In fact, the speed reminds me a lot of high-end devices, so the recognition is really very fast, and the simple fact of seeing a fingerprint reader inside the screen in a device of this price gives strong points to this device. In addition to the fingerprint reader, it has facial unlock, but this is much simpler, only in 2 dimensions. So I only recommend it for convenience, but for convenience, I think it would be more advisable to enable smart unlock, although in this case, it does not include Google Smart Lock, therefore you can only keep it unlocked if it is connected to any Bluetooth device and specifically devices manufactured by Xiaomi. So, it does not have a very advanced smart unlock feature, and this could be another weak point, as the vast majority of Android devices do include a feature so that while you are at home or while you are somewhere else, it stays unlocked when you select your safe environments. What it does include is the Google Password Manager, and in this case it does come well configured so that before automatically filling in, it verifies by fingerprint that it is you, and after that, it does place the password. Within the security application, we will also be able to enable other tools that may be useful, such as application lock, so that in case you get to lend your phone already unlocked, you can select which applications will have to request your fingerprint again or a pattern that may be different from the lock screen. It also has the option of second space, with which you can have 2 phones in the same, each space with its own files and applications, and you can also clone applications to use 2 instances of them on the same phone. Within the file manager, we will also find a category called private files, which will allow us to safeguard files protected with a pattern that can be different from the lock screen or also by our fingerprint. Within the security application, we will also find a scan to avoid any malware. Although in this case, it is a proprietary antivirus, unlike other manufacturers that have collaborations with more recognized cybersecurity companies such as Avast or similar. It does not include a child mode, and that is probably another of the few improvements or complaints that we could have in this device. So, if you're going to lend your cell phone to a little one, you would have no way to limit the applications or time, and if you happen to lose your phone, you have the traditional Google function to find it, but in addition to this, you could enable the special Xiaomi mode, which is actually much more secure, so it is important that you access the Xiaomi account settings and then Xiaomi Cloud, and in this case, you will enable all the options that will appear here. What I find very strange is that it asks you and requests all these permissions being a system application. I consider that everything should come already configured, but in this case, yes, you can get to enable the Find My Device feature of Xiaomi, which is a little more robust than Google's implementation, so you might have more chances to find your cell phone if you enable the Xiaomi option. And finally, like every Android device, it has the digital wellness feature so you can see how much time you spend on your different apps, and you can also set up parental controls on your family's devices. Also remember that by pressing the on-off button 5 times, you could initiate an emergency call, but in this case it seems to have a conflict with the camera opening gesture, so there are still things to improve in the system. The battery is 5,100 milliamps, but in my tests it actually performed less than 5,000 milliamp batteries, so even though it's a very high looking capacity, it seems like it's still not very well optimized. With the battery drainer running, which I always use in the foreground, we managed 4 hours with 6 minutes, which may be up to an hour less than what other devices have given me, so I don't think it's its battery strength. I wouldn't say it's a disastrous battery either, but the moment you hear that it has 5,100 milliamperes, you might think it's a strong point, and in reality it seems that it's not. Having this battery draining app in the background while playing some video, this device came in at about 5 hours and 16 minutes. So it seems to manage more or less well the apps running in the background. The remarkable thing is that it was not closing them constantly, and anyway you can get to configure perfectly the performance you wanted to have with some apps if you wanted to suspend them constantly or save power. Fortunately, it also has a battery saving mode that will surely help you to extend the battery life much more, and it also has an ultra saving mode that can help you in emergencies as it will restrict several things on the phone, but still allows you to add some applications that you want to continue using anyway. The charger is 67 watts and is included in the box, so it offers a very fast charge. In this price range, again, we're going to say that's one of its strongest points because its competitors will have much simpler chargers. In 15 minutes in my test, it recovered 36% power. After 30 minutes into the test, it recovered 71% and the full charge was completed in only 49 minutes. So it really is a very fast charging device. In case you want to take care of the battery, note that it has optimized charging, so it may charge a little bit slower after 80% after you've learned your routine. So I recommend you keep that option enabled if you prefer to leave your cell phone charging all night, although it is not so recommended. It doesn't have a charging lock system at a specific percentage as we could find in other cell phones, but I don't consider that as such a weak point. Just a different implementation of the battery care options. Let's talk about connectivity, because here we also find strengths. This device does support connecting to 5G networks, so we will find good download speeds in that sense. And within the security application, we will also find an option to block the use of our data. That is to say, you will be able to set whether applications can connect to the internet using mobile data or only using Wi-Fi, so you can get to manage much better the use of mobile data. But despite supporting good mobile data connectivity on the Wi-Fi side, we do not have something as advanced, so it stays with Wi-Fi 5. It still gives us good download speeds, but it's not something as advanced as Wi-Fi 6. But in the price range, we could not demand Wi-Fi 6. We will also find Bluetooth 5.2 and NFC. Then you can access Google Wallet directly from the quick settings panel. Here you could get to set up your card so that you can pay simply by bringing the back of the cell phone close to some bank terminal with compatible cards. And this NFC feature is not usually common in its price range, another of its strengths. However, we won't find FM radio, and that may be a weak point finally, as in its price range it may be a bit more common to find other devices with this feature. Also, it can't project its screen via cable, although that's something we only see in the high end, but it can project your screen wirelessly, and it's advanced projection too, as it even lets you project with the window minimized so you can do something else on your cell phone while you're projecting maybe some presentation. It also allows you to turn off the screen of your cell phone while you are doing the projection and hide notifications on the projection so that they can only be seen from your cell phone. So it has advanced features in this regard as well. Although curiously, it also includes a section called wireless display where other monitors appear. So here again we find redundancy in the operating system. It's also going to be able to connect to your car through Android Auto. And finally, with respect to the sensors, we're going to find good and bad things. The good thing is that it has a geomagnetic field sensor, which is not usually common in this price range. It also has gyroscope, but the proximity sensor is virtual, so it's not easily enabled. It's only going to be enabled when you're close to your ear. That can cause some instability, so this is a weak point. In the ecosystem, Xiaomi always gets to stand out because of the large number of products that it has, not just cell phones, but also things like TVs, machines to automatically feed your pets, toothbrushes, and many other things that you can connect to your cell phone. So it's an extremely extensive ecosystem which goes far beyond just offering a tablet, a bracelet, a watch, and a headset, which is the traditional ecosystem of other brands. But despite being a very extensive ecosystem, in reality, the interaction offered between all its devices does not seem to be as advanced as what we could find in other brands that have a slightly less extensive ecosystem, but with better integration. In this case, they have technologies such as Google's Nearby Share to share files, which will soon be called Quick Share. This allows you to share files between other devices. So in addition to that, it has Mi Share, which allows you to share files quickly between Xiaomi devices. It also brings Google Fast Pair technology to easily connect you to third-party headphones. Cloud storage is entirely from Google through Google Drive, as Xiaomi has discontinued its Xiaomi Cloud in much of the world. So currently, if you want to sync your gallery photos, you can do it directly with Google Photos. And home device controls can work with both Google Home and Xiaomi Home. So from both apps, you could get to control lights and other things that you have installed in your smart home. So yes, we have a very extensive ecosystem, but you also have to remember that the Xiaomi Home app can be installed on other brands. So it does not give you as such an advantage to have a Xiaomi cell phone to interact with other Xiaomi devices. Let's talk about performance now, because this device has the Snapdragon 7S Gen 2 processor. A processor that sounds very advanced, but honestly it has been one of the most disappointing processors that have been presented lately. Although disappointing for the range it was aimed at, because this processor was aimed at the mid-high range. So to see this processor in a lower mid-range device is actually a good surprise. As you can see, it took 3.6 seconds on average to open each of the apps. And in this price range, I think that's a good thing. In this case, I have the edition with 8 GB of RAM, and definitely that seems to be giving us very high performance in this regard, because we're not noticing app restarts, and also it doesn't feel slow switching between all these apps either. Notice how the device is still maintaining good performance, definitely. And even within applications that are loading multimedia content and other things, we don't see the device getting stalled or frozen. So definitely performance is a very strong point on this device, even though, as I tell you, the processor disappointed at the time. But in this price range, it's very unusual to see a 7 series processor. So as much as it has disappointed, that processor actually at this price is a pleasant surprise, because it will allow us a super smooth performance, super fast compared to other devices sold at this same price. Note that it also offers us 4 GB of virtual RAM that cannot be disabled. And it seems that in this case, if they worked well, as if it managed to keep open all the applications that I had running, I got my hands on the 256 GB storage model, which is already very good, but if you get the 512 version, it is even better. It's going to be a device that's not going to fill up easily, and it doesn't seem like the storage is going to be exaggeratedly slow like we've seen on other budget devices that are already starting to integrate 256 GB of storage as well. So storage is also going to be a strong point, although you can't put a micro SD in it, so that could be a weak point. Next, we're going to do our traditional test of exporting a video recorded with this cell phone, totaling 1 minute in length, stitching together several clips in Full HD, so let's see how long it takes to export. As you can see, 20 seconds practically. So it is an extremely powerful device in this price range, and it can serve you perfectly for video editing. For the gaming experience, it will feature Game Turbo, although curiously, Game Turbo must be enabled from the security app. From my point of view, it should already come out, but it is one of the things that Xiaomi should improve of its operating system. Also, when you open Game Turbo, then it says Game Space, so I don't know what the official name is. But inside this app, you have a compilation with the games you have installed. It shows you the current state of the system with its battery, CPU, and GPU consumption, and it's also going to allow you to open other performance profiles, whether you want to prioritize power saving, or also have a more balanced mode, or a high quality mode, or customize specifically how you want the game to perform. It even allows you to modify the anti-aliasing and some other filters and some pretty specialized things. So it allows you to tweak all kinds of things when you're gaming because it has a Qualcomm GPU. And in the settings, it also allows you to modify some shortcuts that you're going to have available. So notice how when you open a game, Game Turbo runs, and you have these options from the side panel, so you can quickly clear your device's memory, optimize system stuff, or even open an app in a floating window so you can reply to your messages without the need to leave your game. You can also quickly enable Do Not Disturb mode, take screenshots, screen recordings, or wirelessly project your screen. It also has some color filters that you can use for different styles of games. It can optimize Wi-Fi connectivity and can also change the style of notifications so they are not getting in your way if you are gaming. It includes a voice modifier for apps that include chat, and finally some timers focused on arena games. In Call of Duty, by default, this device offers high-quality graphics at a very high frame rate. In fact, it also offers us the maximum frame rate per second, keeping the graphic quality high. You can also apply some special filters, but here the curious thing is that it does not offer us all the support for graphic effects, although it does enable the super resolution function and other experimental functions of this game. In the test, the truth is that it did extremely well. At this price, it is definitely very remarkable that it allows you to play with this quality at 60 frames per second. But not only does it give us the ability to use these features, it also maintains a very good performance. It has a few drops in frames per second, but even when recording the screen, it maintains an extremely high performance. So I think for this price range, it's going to be very difficult for you to find a better device, which gives you a superior experience when you're playing this content. In the Legends game, we changed the automatic setting to a setting that does not correspond to its price, as we set the graphic detail high at 60 frames per second due to the excellent performance we had noticed in the previous game. So just to give you an idea, this setting we usually select for devices that have approximately a price around 12,000 Mexican pesos. That is a price of 3 times more than what this device costs. So it is surprising to see the performance it achieved on this occasion. It was very high performance. Obviously it does have some low peaks, but it doesn't freeze or anything like that. So really the performance is going to be extremely good in this area. You even get to see good graphic detail. So if your priority is gaming, I don't think there's going to be a better device than this. In the SpongeBob game, by default, it gives us the high resolution and quality at 60 frames per second. This setting we usually use on much more expensive devices, but we kept it to test how it was. In this case, it seems that the game is not so optimized for this processor, as here we noticed that it was a higher setting than it should be. In this case, we did notice several drops in frames per second. Even when recording the screen, we noticed that it takes much more work. So the ideal in some games will be to lower the graphics settings a bit because it can get to suffer quite a bit. Although I must say that the heating remained quite low. So heating is not a problem, but there are some contents that are not very well optimized for this processor, and you'll notice that the stability is very low because when you're looking at far distances, the device is going to get a lot slower compared to what happens when you're looking at close distances. Lastly, on Henshin Impact, we put a little bit more of a test on it according to the price that this device is priced at. So by default it gives the low quality, but we changed it to very low and went up to 60 frames per second to see how it was doing with low motion blur. Obviously we saw something positive here as well, since most competitors can't go above 30 frames per second. But this device was able to go up. The fluidity is quite noticeable, and in this case it was practically always at 55 frames per second, so it really was a good experience. So I insist that in this price range, it was really good to see this processor that was aimed at much more expensive devices. But in this case, it's been a good choice of processor in this device that's looking to be much more affordable. You are going to enjoy good gameplay even while recording the screen as long as you select acceptable graphic qualities. So if you want to record gameplays and share them with your friends, this is a very good choice. As a conclusion, this is a super attractive device for practically all its specifications. It has very few weak points, so they are very concrete. But if those weaknesses for you can go unnoticed, I think it will be a purchase you're going to really enjoy. For now, we've come to the end of this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, you know you can point it out, and we'll see you next time.